Okay. So welcome. I think there was a few other people, so I'll say my name again. My name is Nabila. My pronouns are she, her. And I am going to be adminning on today's workshop on wood finishing, featuring Allison Samuels, your host, who is also the creator and brains behind the Level Up project. We are so thrilled, beyond thrilled, to welcome you to our very first week, session 1 of the Level Up project, and supporting our vision of accessible education, knowledge sharing, and network building. All of us at the project have an innate sense that the industries that we work within need to change, and that we're individually responsible for helping that shift along. It is through both small and daily habit changes alongside collective action that we think systems can be created to support more people. And right now, you are part of that creating. An idea that we've been thinking about a lot in the last few months, and the impetus for Allison starting this workshop, is articulated by the activist and abolitionist Mariame Kaba, in that we don't have to build things that last forever. We should not need a project like this to exist in the first place, because free and accessible education and knowledge sharing should be baseline. And this project was begun as just one of the many resources and stepping blocks on the way to greater equity in the physical skills-based fields of predominantly craft and design. It already feels like this project is growing and shifting to better serve everyone who would like to participate. And this is a dream to be a part of this collective and building this project with you. This model works because we are collecting all the dollars into one pot and then redistributing them back out. We believe that everyone contributing in accordance with their wealth and privileges is one of the ways to achieve a more equitable social system. And it's been really exciting to watch this happen in real time. And you are making that happen. We can build a framework, but if you're not here to participate, this honestly doesn't work. So thank you. As a reminder, all proceeds from our ticket sales and donations to our website are ongoing through the end of the weekend. And it all goes to Arts Business Collaborative and Map for Youth, which is a mutual aid project. So if you feel strongly about the project, we do invite you to continue donating through the weekend. So let me just quickly check and pause to see if I'm admitting any more people. Yes. All in. Okay, great. And so feel free to drop any questions throughout the workshop into the chat box or DM me separately if you don't want it seen by everybody else. I will be turning off my video to focus and my mic. Sorry, mic. I was like, what is that word? Kept wanting to say mute. I'll be on mute. I'll have my mic off so that I can collect your questions and be spotlighting both all the videos. And if your questions are not addressed throughout the workshop, just put them in the chat box. We're going to do a follow-up at the end afterwards. This workshop is being recorded, so we'll also be sending you this in about a week. And we do apologize if there's any technical glitches. This whole Zoom thing is new to many of us here at the Level Up project. And so we're learning along the way. And on that note, I'd like to officially welcome Allison. And I'm gonna read a little bit about her. She is the founder behind Two Tree Studios, as you may have seen. She designs and fabricates vessels, utensils, sculptural objects, and custom wooden furniture out of her shop in East Williamsburg, New York. Every piece is hand carved, sanded, and finished with consideration for longevity, as well as a commitment to sustainable production and operational practices. Through an upbringing surrounded by forests, rivers, and mountains, Samuels cultivated an early appreciation for the natural world. As such, her work emphasizes, and it is dictated in part by, the unique properties she observes within the raw material itself. which we get to work with today. So with that, welcome everyone. Thank you for bearing with me on that intro. Let's get to it.
Thanks, Bella. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. And bye, Bella. Also, that was like you're welcome to keep your video on if you want. Yeah, that was just the first workshop that I did. I was like, there's no way I can focus with my screen on, so. Yeah, I'm like really fucking thrilled that all of you are here. This whole project has been an incredible learning curve. It's been something that I've been thinking about for a lot of years, basically since I entered the field of woodworking about 6 years ago. I feel like my own experience entering a field that I had no experience within and no formal education around, and going from that to building up a business from scratch without any training in running a business and what marketing means, how to educate myself, how to build a network and community of people that like actually feed me and that I can feel part of, has been an epic learning curve. Also, I feel like, you know, it could have been a lot easier if there were other systems in place that might have supported me better along the way. And I say that with full acknowledgement that I come from an enormous amount of privilege. So in thinking about getting this project going, a lot of what has been on my mind is just like how many people are out there who don't have access to all of the resources that even I have had, and how much easier it could be for like a lot more people. So I'm really excited that this first iteration of the project is happening. It feels very much like the first iteration of a project. And I quite honestly want all of your feedback on like where this shit goes. I have a lot of ideas. We all have a lot of ideas. And like the next, hopefully, workshop series is going to be in December. At least that's what I keep telling myself. So I want your feedback. This is going to grow and accommodate a lot more people. I hope. Apologies if you're hearing like the motorbikes outside and like any trucks that are coming by. This is an industrial area of Williamsburg. Yeah, okay. So on that note, let's get started. We are going to talk about, and by we, I guess I mean me, right? Going to talk about like some theory of woodworking, and then we'll get into like actual like sanding shit. The reason, and I think it's probably going to be about like ish half and half, but like again, we'll see. But the reason I want to talk a little bit about like what are we looking at when we're looking at wood? What is grain when we talk about wood grain? How to spot the differences between some wood types, how to like what different kinds of finishes are out there, what you might want to be looking for like different kinds of projects that you're working on at home. I want to cover like also like what kinds of sandpapers, like how do you know what to start with, if you're like wanting to do like a little project in a day, or if you want to use these exact same techniques to finish or refinish a piece of furniture, because these are like, it's basically the same stuff, it's just like different, like you do it in different ways with different materials. So I want to talk a bit about that, because these are like, yeah, it's all like pretty basic, but I think if you don't know like where to start, it's hard to apply all of these techniques and to like a lot of different things that you might want to be doing. So also in advance, the Zoom thing is weird and new. I have a mouse here. Is like a cordless mouse, I have some notes on my screen, and I'm gonna be like scrolling and like a little bit reading my notes. So if you see me doing this, I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just, this is what I got right now. So some basic differences. Also, number one, there is no right way of doing any of this. Again, I am not formally trained. As a woodworker, I have worked in a shitload of shops and for different people. I have also now worked for myself for about 4 years. I've been doing this for myself full time for 2.5 or so. And I've been working in woodworking for about like 6.5 years. I am the first person to tell you that I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I feel like I've gained a lot of experience working for a lot of people and just testing shit out for myself. I work a lot, so I do have a lot of like hours banked doing this. I'm constantly revising my methods. I'm constantly like trying new products. I do a lot of like, as a lot of you know, I think I crowdsource information. I like really try to learn in like all of the ways that I can that are outside of like more formal education systems. So in any case, what I tell you might not be the thing that works for you. I hope you're able to like take some of these practices into your own home or whatever business. I know some of you are business owners as well, and some of you are woodworkers. So like truly, I want to hear what you're doing as much as I want to tell you what I'm doing. That's how we all get better. So for the woodworkers among us, apologies for this first part. What is grain? I'm saying this because I've been surprised at like how some people don't know when I say like sand with the wood grain. What do we mean when we say sand with the wood grain? What are we looking for? What are we looking at? As the tree grows vertically, the wood fibers are growing longitudinally. They are aligning themselves along the axis of the tree trunk, right? So if you imagine like a cluster of straws bunched together, and the straws are the tree, the straws are like sucking up the water and nutrients from the soil, from the earth, and it's like running up and down the length of the tree, spreading all the nutrients and water and good things. So I'm actually going to do this, maybe it would be helpful. So like this is our tree. Can everybody see this? Yeah. So this is our tree, or this is our tree. As the tree grows, and I'm showing you this now because you see like the vertical lines here, like that is wood grain. The tree is growing up and down. We can also like picture, oh, hi, bye. We can also picture the tree as like the cluster of straws. If we cut across the top of the straws, of the cluster of straws, that top, if we look down, that is called end grain. If we instead, we have our straws here, if we cut across the side and we look this way, that is called long grain. So same for this cutting board. This is long grain. And if we look at the, Bela, can you switch to this view, maybe? If we switch to, ooh, yeah, you really can't see anything here. If we switch to, these are like the ends of the fibers, and that is called end grain. We don't need to like really focus on, or we're not really going to talk about like why you might want to be doing like or why you might want to be thinking about end grain or long grain for this particular workshop, because this is not about building, this is about finishing. But what is important to just like maybe think about or know is like, as your tree is growing, we will want to be standing along we want to be like treating the different surfaces a little bit differently. The finish is going to be absorbed differently between like end grain or long grain. And like the fibers are going to be a little bit like thirstier on the long grain usually, but you'll need more finish to coat your end grain. You also, as you're like building things, just like a side tiny note, again, like tree is growing outwards like this is like straw clusters, tree is growing outwards, like these are the rings of the tree. You'll want, if you're ever like gluing things together, you want to always be gluing along the long grain, because that's how the tree is growing naturally. And the glue joints are going to be like a lot stronger along the end grain than they would be on the long grain than they would be on the end grain. So like the tree, you can't like stack trees on top of each other like this, like short grain to short grain. It won't hold. But like if you think about a tree growing out like this and like the rings growing out, that's where you want to be like packing on more material as you're building things. So that's like a little bit about long grain, end grain. We also have hard and soft wood. Most of the like kitchen tools that you will have at home, I hope, are hardwood. There's no reason, I think, ever to be using soft wood for any of your kitchen tools like cutting boards or utensils. It's so soft, it won't hold up. So I use walnut, beech, and maple for all of my hardwoods that I work with, also because that's like those are American hardwoods, and so they're easier to come by. Thank you, Vila. So here we have walnut is just like a darker wood. Beech is, whoa, this is weird. Beech is like a mid-tone wood, and maple is like a lighter wood. These woods are all have a tighter grain clusters to them. So finish does not like seep in quite as much. They will like, what's the word, hold up to knife marks a lot better than they would softwood. There's also sapwood and heartwood. These are, wow, camera. These are examples of, this is both walnut. Actually, is it better? Just down here. These are both walnut, very different colors. This is heartwood. This is sapwood. This is on the outside of the tree. This is on the inside of the tree. What else have we got? Also, the way, like where you get your materials from and how the materials are processed makes a big difference in the color of the actual wood itself. So this, this is, I'm so sorry, I like don't know what I'm looking at. This is walnut. You can like kind of see there's darker and lighter. This kind of like crazy variety in color is has to do also with where I get the material from. This is air dried, is not kiln. It's dried, like finished at the very end with a kiln, but for the most part, it's air dried. It takes longer. It keeps the wood more pliable, more flexible, less brittle. It's also local. All of the wood that I use is like sustainably sourced. It's mostly from within 50 miles of Brooklyn. I have like a relationship with my main lumber supplier at this point. Rico Brooklyn, shout out Rico Brooklyn. So you can like bend it, right? So this, and I can do that because this wood is air dried. It's like better quality. Whereas, and I mean, I was like about to try and show you something that like can't be bent, but I work with really good wood, so you should be able to bend all of it. Okay, that's that. In terms of finishes, we are not going to talk a ton about finishes in this, or like different kinds of finishes in this very moment, because I want to spend more time on that towards the end. We can get more into it, but I do want to show you some differences between like store-bought finishes and finishes that you can make at home.
Al, I have one question from Hannah. What is the alternative to air dried wood?
Kiln dried.
Kiln dried
Is, I mean, so like I would say, yeah, not all wood is going to be kiln dried. Like, I was just making some vases and like picked up a log of maple from like down the street from my apartment, and then like brought that into the studio and turned it, and now, you know, like it's gonna be air drying completely, like no kiln whatsoever. But for the most part, when you're buying like boards, like lumber, and especially if you're purchasing slabs, like from a tree, from a supplier, even like a local one like I do, they are going to be finishing that in the kiln, because there's just like so much moisture in the tree, so it needs to like zap it at the end a little bit. Thanks for that question. Yeah, finishes. So these are a few finishes. Is this all backwards for you? No? Okay, it's backwards for me. So these are some finishes that I have used. I feel different ways about them. Some of them are greener. These are all like theoretically green finishes, except for like Rust-Oleum. This is like, you get this at Lowe's, Home Depot, like any hardware store really would carry this stuff. This one is like a medium natural finish. This is, what is it? Linseed oil and beeswax. This stuff is good. I used it on a like kitchen island countertop that Lynn and I had in our apartment at one point. This shit lasted forever, and I never refinished it. That said, it has a smell to it, and it's like a little bit oily. It's like a little bit finicky to work with. But if you're into like the supernatural and like canned finish, like this could be a really awesome option for you. I have this like Rust-Oleum. I don't ever use it. It's like it's like one of the better store-bought finishes to use if you want something that's like low toxicity, but I will only use this if somebody like really requests like a crazy durable finish. They never want to touch it ever again. Like I have a client who I do some like set design work for, sometimes like finishing his like the pieces in his set. So like that's like on Broadway, like you need like a super, super durable finish. Like I'll use this because they don't want to have to like think about it ever again. Otherwise, I prefer not. Osmo. This is what I had been using for like just about every furniture thing that I ever made. Or rather this one. This is just like the satin clear matte. 3054 is like the name of the game. You can see I like use it a lot. This is a totally like green finish. It was developed, it's a German brand, OSMO, by the way. It was developed in Germany as a flooring finish, so meant to hold up to like a lot of use, a lot of wear. I think it's great. Also, it won't, also like you can use it for utensils and stuff, but I would not recommend using it for something that you're going to be like eating off of and cooking with every day. Same for this stuff. This is Osmo's Top Oil, which I've used for a countertop. I bought it specifically for that, as like the even more natural version of this stuff, which is also natural. You can also eat off of it if you so desire. Like I've used it on like baby toys, like it's that natural. And yeah, just like another option. I think it doesn't wear quite as well as this stuff, but it is also a great option. Seikos is where I'm at these days. By these days, I mean like in the last like couple of months. This is like basically the updated version of this. It's another German brand. And you can get both of these. You have to get them online or at like a woodworking, at a local woodworking store. That's where I get them from. But like you won't be able to find these at Lowe's or Home Depot, like unfortunately, or fortunately, because they both kind of suck. But you won't be able to find them at your local hardware store. They're just like too nice, too fancy. They're also pricey. These little cans run about $12 to $20 per can. That said, they last forever. Like I have finished like an entire piece of furniture with just this one, and that means like multiple coats of furniture. So like they do multiple coats of finish on the one piece of furniture. So like they do like really, you get a lot of bang for your buck. I'm sorry to use that phrase. But they also like they apply like very easily, quickly, with again, just like a rag. Okay, that's that. And I'm like super happy to talk about more like furniture finishes later if we want. But we're gonna go into like utensil and cutting board finishes now. So these are some store-bought options if you don't want to make yours at home. I have used all of them, which is why they're here, which is why I'm like, I've used a lot more finishes than this. These are like the ones that I'm like, okay, these are like solid. I would recommend for various applications. This you can find at any hardware store. General Finishes salad bowl finish. This is what you all have in one of your little jars if you have that material packet. Also, do we have a question? Do we want to pause? Sorry, I can't see.
Oh. We're okay. No questions yet. But if you do have questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat box.
So yeah, this is the finish that you all have in your kit. That is so you have this finish with the little blue, the little like pink whatever tape around it. This is the finish that I make and that I use on everything, like everything edible. And I'll show you.
We have a couple of questions coming in. The specific version of Seikos that you use.
So this one is 3305 matte colorless. I premium hard wax oil. um, I have a full suite of these products. And I will send out links to everything after. I use the matte. So this is what I use for furniture and for like all of the vases that I make. That'll be it. Yeah. I used to use Osmo for all of that. I do like satin matte for everything as like the top finish, but I'll use I mean, like we can talk in-depth finishes for like all of the furniture and vases and stuff later, because that's a full fucking 90 minutes of like all of the stuff. But yeah, I will send you out like the list of all the things.
Next question is, what is in the salad bowl finish? Like, what are the ingredients, I'm assuming?
What is in the salad bowl finish? You know, I should know this off the top of my head. The thing is, I don't, because I really don't use it. I don't prefer it. It is, wow, why don't they say what's in it? I will get back to you on that. Mineral spirits is a thing, but it's a resin finish.
Never mind if you don't use it.
I'm sorry. I have used it. This is terrible. This is a bad look for me, sending you things that I don't use. I sent this to you because it's a finish that I have used. I don't use it a lot because I prefer Osmo, which is harder to come by. Like you can get this at any hardware store. This is actually like totally food safe and everything. A lot of people that I know, a lot of woodworkers that I know do use this finish, which is why I'm like, cool. Like this is like good for salad bowls, it's good for cutting boards, good for utensils, like all the things. I find, and I'll talk about like, we'll go over at the end, we'll do it together, like we'll practice after we do like the supernatural finishes, we'll like practice putting this on, and you'll kind of get a sense of why I'm like, this little like doesn't quite do it for me. It dries really quickly. It's not natural, so it's like very sticky. You have to like put it on in a very particular way. I find that it's a little bit less forgiving. That said, it's durable. So yeah, but I will follow up with like ingredients and everything too. Booze Blocks, mystery oil. Booze Blocks makes like a couple different products, some waxes, some oils. There are so many different kinds of like oils and waxes out there that you can just buy, which is super cool. They're fine, nothing wrong with them. Also nothing special. It's just they've made a name for themselves. If you like the smell of it, yeah, like it smells fine. Like it's totally decent and solid. Walrus oil, wood wax. They also make like a furniture finish, furniture oil or something. I went through a phase where I didn't want to make my own wax. You also, in the little tin that you have, there's a wax that I make. And again, like the one with the little pink thingy is the oil that I make. I don't sell that, so like I'm not actually advocating you buying my stuff. I'm just like, we'll go over how you make all of your own. This is totally fine. Like this is totally fine and great. I just wanted something else. The finish, the wax that you have is vegan. This is made with beeswax. That said, I use candelilla wax in the wax that you have, which is like mostly odorless, and I have like a little bit of rosemary extract in there to like just smell a little nice. The oil that you have that I make has propolis in it, so that's not vegan, unfortunately. But you can also just take the propolis. I mean, you can't take it out, but like if you were to make your own, you could just not use propolis. the finishes that I use. Again, this is just one thing that you could do. You can tell me what recipes that you like instead.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Can I make one suggestion?
Thank you.
The feedback on the sound when you place things down is pretty loud. And so we're having to turn our sound down and then can't hear you that well. So if you could just motion to it instead of picking up and dropping it, because I think that wood is like resonating the sound.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry to interrupt.
That's so good to know. I did not realize I was banging shit around. Mineral oil right here. This is the base for both the wax that you have and the oil that you have. This is what the finished oil that you have looks like, just in a clear bottle. This is what's in your amber bottle. I use, where's my ratios? Oh man. You know what? It's somewhere over there. I'll follow up in an email. I measure out, handy scale. I just got this. I used to do it just by eye, like measuring by eye, and like there's little milliliter marks on the thing. But there's ratios, and I will email you that later. It's mostly mineral oil. Then I add some propolis, which is like a bee byproduct. And then I add a little bit of rosemary extract in there. Rosemary extract is just like aesthetic. There's no like real property to that. I think it cuts the scent of the propolis a little bit. The propolis is like pretty intense. It's kind of like nutty. And I mean, like if you think about smelling like wax, the honeycomb, it kind of smells like a honeycomb, like on steroids. So I think the rosemary extract is like cuts that a little bit. So that's what's in this little jar. The propolis helps to create like a slightly harder finish on the mineral oil, or than just mineral oil itself. I used to use more of a wax-based finish, less oil-based finish. I find that the oil finishes with the propolis tend to hold up actually just as well to a lot of wear, and they're easier to touch up. You can just like rub in a little bit more oil and it'll flash off like really quickly, versus using a wax finish. There's a phrase, oh, this is terrible, but like once you go wax, you can't come back. Like once you go black, oh God, terrible. But basically, if you start with wax, you have to like keep doing wax kind of forever. You have to take it all the way down and then bring it back up with oil. But if you start with oil, then you can like keep layering and layering. So I find that it like holds, yeah, it just like works better for me for the most part. In your little tin, you have a mineral oil and candelilla blend that also has a little bit of the rosemary extract in it. Again, I will follow up with the ratio situation. This is the same blend that you have. Sorry if the sound is weird. This is the same blend that you have in your tin, but this is like much creamier. I don't know if you can see, but yours is like quite a bit harder. This has twice as much mineral oil as yours does at home right now. So this is not going to give you like as much of a hard finish as the one that you have. I'm showing you just because you'll want different finishes depending on like what you want to do with it, how often you want to refinish your stuff. And that's a personal preference. Um, yeah, that's what I got recent.
You're at the halfway mark.
Wow, thank you. Okay, so we are gonna go to sandpaper real fast. I'm trying to like place shit really gently. Um,
Sorry to put you off guard.
no, you're good. In your kits, you have 5 different kinds of sandpaper. You have 120, 220, 320, 400, and 1,000 grit sandpaper. Sandpaper is just an abrasive. It's like a lot of aluminum oxide normally. That's like like dust that's stuck to a sheet, either like a fabric sheet or a paper sheet. You can use like wet or dry sandpaper. The black sandpaper that you have, 400 grit and 1,000 grit, that's wet dry sandpaper. We use the wet dry stuff to buff all of our oil finishes, like pretty close to right after we've applied them. That like oil is going to allow us to like reduce scratches as we are sanding and like keep like a super smooth finish. I didn't used to wet sand. I used to just do dry sanding for everything, and I'm like a big fan of the wet sand, but like only once we're in the finishing process. Before we get to finishing, I just do dry sanding.
What is the benefit of wet sanding over dry sanding, or vice versa?
I think it's about, I mean, again, like you tell me, in my mind, so like you're essentially like buffing and like you're using the oil and like the wax that you've just applied to as like a lubricant for your sandpaper to like be like buffing as you're also sanding, as you're also abrading the surface. So and it also will like help minimize any scratches that will show up that are like easier to show up when you're dry sanding. That's what the internet says, but also a thing that I have found like just doing this for a long time, a few years. I actually use Abranet sanding discs for pretty much everything. I did not, I did not give you any of these because, you know, you're at home and like they're less useful for you. But if you want to be doing a lot of sanding at home, I recommend getting a sanding block that is a Velcro pad that you can use hook and loop sand. So this is hook and loop sandpaper. Sandpaper, it's a sanding disc, but sandpaper. These come in like rectangular rolls as well that you can use. They just like stick to the sanding block. Oh, yay. Like this. And they come off easily. All of these little holes allow the dust to like penetrate through, and you can like take it off and like shake it out really easily. This stuff lasts a lot longer, doesn't gunk up, is also way more expensive, which is why you're using like regular sandpaper at home right now. That's that. The other thing that you guys have in your boxes are these sanding blocks. I recommend always using a sanding block as you're sanding like a flat surface versus just trying to like fold up your sandpaper and flying solo. This will make sure that you keep your board or your countertop or whatever like even. And you also have a dowel in there. That is to get at like any weird, like you can go in the holes with a dowel. You can perhaps sand like a perimeter more easily, or any like little spots, any like little curves. With a dowel, you can be wrapping your sandpaper around it. A little tip, I use spray adhesive. Oh God, sorry. There we go. I use spray adhesive around like a dowel. I'll like wrap some sandpaper around a dowel and attach it with spray adhesive so that I can be like, I don't have to worry about like holding onto my sandpaper as I sand around like a perimeter. You could do,
Al,
oh yeah.
is that the same concept behind the sanding block? We have a question, not understanding the use of the sanding block.
Oh.
How would you use that with the paper?
So, thank you. Sorry for the loud sound. So we have your sandpaper. This is a different brand, but it's the same. We have your sandpaper here, and your block is here. What you're going to do is, like, I like to use as much of my material as possible. I'm going to fold this into like thirds because that's around the same size as my sanding block. And then I'm gonna rip it up. And I'm going to then fold it around my sanding block, like so. And this is a used one. Folding it around my sanding block. And I am going to be holding on to the edge here and the side here and use it to sand. So the block I'm using as like an extension of my hand that I can keep like totally flat against the surface that I'm trying to sand. And I am using a block that's about 3/4 of an inch thick versus something that's like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, because I think that that works for like my hand shape, but also it gives me enough of a thing to hold on to as I'm sanding, enough to hold on to with the sandpaper. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. The other things that we have on hand are rags. Apologies that I did not send you your rags. I forgot about that. I use scraps of shirts. This is what I've been using forever. This is what I have seen all of the professionals use, just scraps of shirts. I cut little pieces of rags. This is actually a big piece. I would use something that's like half this size to be finishing like a table. Like I use like tiny little scraps of rags all the time. You want to make sure that you're keeping your rags separate for like the different finishes that you might be using. Like keep your oil rag apart from your wax rag if you're doing both. You also want to make sure that you have a clean rag nearby. You'll use that to like wipe away the dust off of what you're working with. You'll also want one at the end to be like buffing your piece. What else do we have? You also have some Scotch-Brite, which is that white, it looks almost like white Velcro, but it's not Velcro. That is just like a little fancy thing that you got. I don't really use that for boards and utensils anymore, although I used to use it as like the final buffing stage. Um, I use that for applying some finish to furniture. Um, I use it also sometimes to like buff my boards and utensils um, with like a final coat if I'm feeling extra fancy. But for the most part, you can use that to like apply finish, or after you've applied your last coat, instead of using a rag, use the Scotch-Brite to like buff off your piece. That is all of the theory stuff that I've got. Now it is time to get into the sanding stuff. Who here has things that they want to be working with today? Chris does, Farah does, Mara, Connie, cool. Hannah does. Some chopsticks, cool. Okay. Oh, Allison does. Okay, amazing. So many things. Yes. Is that a rolling pin, Allison? Cool. Okay. So one thing, I also have like a pile of all of my boards and utensils from home that I have really never refinished, which is terrible. So we're gonna do it today. So we are gonna start with this guy. One thing that to just like note, so when you're refinishing something at home without an orbital sander, also I just wanted to mention, I use an orbital sander for all of my sanding for boards and stuff. This is like a Velcro pad. This is what I use to keep things flat instead of a sanding block, or instead of this Velcro sander or Velcro sanding pad. This will just get you further if you're working in bulk. But we are doing it at home, and so we are using a sanding block and sandpaper. But it's going to be like exactly the same process. So one thing to note, if you're not using like an orbital sander so that you can like really like get at it, when you're refinishing, theoretically you're refinishing something that like is really fucked up, has a lot of like knife marks and everything. Possibly it has some like stains from oil and hopefully not mold. Like maybe it has some mold on it, I don't know, from being in your dish rack. Maybe it has like turmeric stains. Maybe it has like super, you can't really see, but like super deep knife marks. You got to be realistic about how much material you can actually remove at home without an orbital sander. You are not going to be able to like bring this thing back to like zero. Is not going to be possible. What you can do is remove like the more surface level cuts and remove more like surface oil stains. So this board is like a bamboo board from IKEA or something like that, or like Bed Bath & Beyond. I don't know. We had it at home. And it looks exactly on the same, like this, on the same side, on the other side. I refinished, I put like one coat of finish on this yesterday after I had sanded it, and it looks like this. You can still see some of those knife marks, but I've been able to like get out like quite a lot of them. Also, like the majority of staining that was on here is not there anymore. So, but like you definitely are never going to be able to bring this thing back to like sellable in a store. That said, if you have stuff at home that's like way closer to new, um, like these are chopsticks, these are beach chopsticks that I did make. These we've been eating with at home for since March. And these I will be able to bring back to brand new. But something like this cutting board, I just want you to be realistic about like what's possible with your refinishing.
For
Also,
the cutting board,
mhm,
Connie has a question. Did you use oil or wax to finish that one side?
this is the oil finish. That's with this finish that you have.
Got it.
And again, I use oil finishes for everything. I really don't use wax anymore. I gave it to you so that you can see if that's going to be better for you. That is a finish that I used to use on everything. I personally find that the oil works just as well. And so that's what I like.
What are the differences between using oil versus wax? Like, are there characteristic differences?
Um, so the wax will be more resistant to water, as in like a baseline. Like it will always be more resistant to water, right? Like think of a duck and like its feathers, like its little waxy feathers. So it will like hold up to more like use probably. And I think in general, the reason I switched to using oil-based finishes with a little bit of propolis, so that's like think of it as like starter wax. I don't know. I switched to that because I wanted people to be able to refinish their boards or utensils with anything that they had at home. So if you're using a wax finish to start with, you're always going to have to be like refinishing it with a wax finish. You can't switch to an oil finish. So I wanted to be able to tell people like use walnut oil at home if you got it, like use avocado oil, use like mineral oil. You wouldn't really be able to do that in the same way if you were starting from a wax finish.
Thank you.
Cool. The last thing before we actually start finishing is daylight. It's so helpful to be doing this in the daylight or with daylight and natural light hitting you. I think it's really helpful to be working in the daylight so that you can see, you can like be tilting your piece and like see where the high-low oil spots are. And yeah, that's that. So when you're setting up your space, if you're working at home, obviously, you are going to want a nice big surface. Lay out some cardboard, lay out a giant sheet of, like plywood, whatever you got, so that you can make a mess everywhere. You will be getting like a lot of dust everywhere. So expect that, wear something you can get dirty in, but also like give yourself a lot of room and like permission to be messy. You'll have a much more enjoyable experience. I promise you. Bumpers are, I use these bumpers on everything, to like, these are just like for door stops. I use them, I stick them like on my cardboard or on a piece of plywood to raise up the piece that I'm working on off of the table, so that the little rubber bumper like helps with slippage. It like grabs onto the piece, but also it raises it up and I don't get like oil stains everywhere. What else? We are always going to be, right, starting with the lowest grit, working our way up to higher grit. Low grit, something like 80 or 150 is a low grit. 1000 is the highest grit that you have right now, will be like our final finishing step. Okay, that's that. So we are setting ourselves up with a big sheet of cardboard that we can like literally be on top of or like working on. We have our like bumpers or little like cones or extra pieces of cardboard to like be propping up our work piece on our work surface. We have all of our rags and our finishes that we want to be using. We have just gone ahead and taken our sandpaper and we have ripped it into thirds or whatever will be best for our sanding block. And we are good to go.
So to clarify, we should be starting with the 80 or 100 grit sandpaper first on the sand block.
Yes, I think I really glossed over that one. Thank you. So we're gonna start on our lowest finish, our lowest grit for our sandpaper. That will be 120 or 150 for all of you if you have the material packet. And if you are refinishing something that is like pretty close to new, I would say let's start at like 320. Or even if it's something that's like super, super new, you're just like, hey, I want to, you know, get this shiny again. It's not shiny anymore. You can start at the wet sanding stage of this process. Wet sanding meaning with 400 or with 1,000 grit. So like almost close to done. We are going to start right now from 150. We are going to pretend that we are working with a board or utensil that is like really gross. So we want to like take it down. We want to take it all the way down and we want to bring it right back up. So these are the exact same steps that you will be using, that you would use if you were just like starting from essentially a piece of raw wood. Also what you would be doing if you were to be like making yourself some furniture. Again, very similar steps, just like with different finishes. So we have your table. I have my plywood board, which has, can you switch to this? This has the little bumpers on it. And I arranged them in like a triangle shape just so that it will accommodate the different size boards that I have, that I'm working with, and I don't have to move them around. I really do try to like reuse every little last scrap and like bit of bumper. I have had that sheet of bumpers for 6 years. Like really, I don't like buying new things if I don't have to. And I try to reuse everything that I possibly can. So we are starting with our first board. Your grain, this is where grain comes back in. Your grain should always be perpendicular to your body. So the grain on this board, you can see it like very clearly is running this way. You also see, this is like a classic breadboard style. The ends of the board are capped with the grain running in the opposite direction. So we have grain running in 2 directions, but the majority of the grain is running in this one direction. And so that's the direction that we're going to be sanding in for the most part. And then we will come back, and at the end, we will be sanding, like finishing it this way, like with the grain. That's so that you aren't seeing like all of, you'll see the scratches more. They'll telegraph more on if you're sanding cross grain. So this would be sanding cross grain, across the grain. This is sanding with the grain. So Kayla, if I sand, is that like really loud?
Can you do a few more swipes? That's okay for me. Is that okay for everyone else?
Okay.
I see a couple of thumbs up. Okay,
Okay,
Cool.
awesome. So yeah, so what we're gonna do,
Oh,
oh,
also time check, 20 minutes.
yeah, cool, thank you. Yeah, I should have done this a couple more times in advance. Okay. Also, please drop your questions in the chat box. And Bila, you can like shout them out to me now, or we can save them and I will absolutely like follow up in an email later and with answers and stuff. But if I know, I think Nikki had some questions about like dust, which I want to address in a few minutes too. So yeah, we are holding we're like using one hand to like hold our piece. We want it like stable. And I usually have like one full hand like down, holding my cutting board or whatever. Sorry about this.
Really quick question before you get into position. Can you remind us what sandpaper number we're using to start with a board that needs a lot of love?
150.
150 in your
Yeah,
material packet.
yeah, you don't have it, but if you like really need to like strip something completely, I would go find 80 grit sandpaper. That would be even easier. So basically, all of the sanding that you're doing in your lowest grit, like it's not going to get any better than that. So like however much you want to take it down, like get rid of whatever knife marks or ever like whatever stains, like whatever you see at the end of your sanding with your lowest grit is the best you're gonna get, really. So this is where you decide like how far you want to take it. So I'm starting to sand, and I'm going across. I'm going like always with the grain. You notice that I'm not going this way. I'm not making circular motions. I am going very much like with the grain, right? That is like for scratching. What we're doing right now is like minimizing any extra scratches. I'm also making sure that I'm not spending too much time in one area or another. Like I'm not just spending all of my time in the center here. I want to be like very clear about like going all the way up and all the way down. And you'll notice that I'm going from like a little bit more than half of center to outside, to the end of the board, because my hand is right here, because my hand is holding onto my workpiece. I'm gonna do this like a whole bunch of times. I'm also noticing that my sandpaper is getting like maybe a little bit gunky. So I'm gonna just like, I'm gonna go over here. I'll show you on top of my piece, but I'm just gonna like tap it so that the dust comes out, or is removed. You might notice, depending on how much oil your board still has on it, you might notice that your sandpaper is gunking up pretty quickly with oil, in which case you can take your sandpaper off and like flick it. Oh wait, you can like flick it a little bit, or you can like just like manually brush it off. If it is like super gunked up, just get yourself a new piece, but I do try to like use everything to like until it's dead.
And how much pressure do you apply?
You're applying, like, what's a good example? I'm applying like a fair amount of pressure. Yeah. I'm going like, I'm pressing pretty hard. What's a good, like, I'm using like not all of my body weight for sure. Like I don't want to tire myself out because I have like a ways to go here. But like as long as you can go, that feels like you can sustain this action for a while. Like that's how hard you want to be pressing. You also want to be making sure that like you are applying an even pressure from the top to the bottom and to the middle, however you're doing that. So you can do this in like even smaller sections if you need to, meaning you can start from the top to the center, just like that, and then start working from like the center down, just like that, if you feel like it's easier to be applying pressure in that way, evenly. But I do recommend the longest strokes possible. That will keep your board consistent throughout. So we didn't, and then when we feel like this is at a good place, I'm going to take my board and I'm going to tap off the dust onto the side. Let us pretend for like a hot sec that I felt like this was like getting to a reasonable place. I'm going to flip it 180 degrees and do the other side. So I had done just a little bit more than half. So I'm going to do a little bit less than half now. And I'm going to work to like feather it in, like feather in that transition. And I'm going to make sure to like sand as much as I did to this side as I did to this side. So
if different parts of the board do not need as much love, should I still apply the same amount of pressure?
Great question. Generally, yes, I think. That said, we didn't talk about this, but you can always start with a straight edge. You can hold it on top of your board and just like get down and like look to see how, like this, and look to see like how warped your board is. If there are any like weird pockets that you know, or like high spots that you know that you'll need to like address, which is not exactly the answer to your question, but that'll help you know as you're sanding, like that'll help you be on the lookout for like the high and low spots. So if like likely most of your knife marks are going to be around the center and less around the perimeter, you wouldn't just want to focus though your sanding in the center, because then you'll make your board even more dipped by the end. So yeah, so we're sanding.
And then if my cutting board is entirely end grain, should I just pick one sanding direction and stick with it?
Yes, that is it. Great question. Let us pretend for a moment that I have gotten I've like taken this thing down. I feel really great about where I'm at. And I'm like ready to move on to the other side. For this particular board, I want to just make sure that I do my final sanding. I give like a 1 or 2 last passes along the end grain, or like along the capped grain on the board's end, to like hide the scratches that I've just made.
What's a good indicator that you've sanded enough?
Does it have like, is it like certainly more smooth than what you started with? B, are all of the knife marks or stains removed that you want to be removed? That's it. If I am working on something that's like really close to new, it should feel pretty fucking perfect by the time I am done with this first step. But if we are sanding something that's like really worn, like this board has like, I don't know if you can see, but I mean, it has like so many gouges. There is no way that I'm going to take this board with a hand sanding block down to like 0 again. I could do it with the orbital sander, but like that would be removing so much material. So I know that I'm not going to even shoot for that. But like with this board, I would definitely want to spend a solid like 10 to 15 minutes on this one grit before I move on to the next grit. The next thing that we do before we're going to move on to the other side of the same board is we're going to address the perimeter. So again, you're always wanting to sand with the grain. So you're going to be moving your board. You're going to be like spinning your board around as you go. And with this board, again, this is the long grain is this way. So I can keep it in this angle. And I'm going to use the block and like follow the curve of the board. And again, sanding until I feel like I have removed, you know, like the weird spots, like the water spots, the mold, like whatever is there. That's it. If your board is moldy, chances are it's time to get a new one. I don't know why I keep saying this. Another thing that you could do for the perimeter, so this board has like a rounded perimeter. So my sanding block is not actually getting at that curve very nicely. So what I would do instead, I'm going to tap off my sandpaper off to the side. And see, it's already starting to get a little gunked up. That's because there is like residual oil on this board, which likely is happening for you too right now. That's fine. You can like flick it off or just keep tapping it out or move on to like the back side of your sandpaper. What I do for the edges, and I tend to save my sandpaper and do this at the very end because again, I like to use the sandpaper and I want to keep this as like a block shape for as long as possible. But I'm gonna fold it up into like little quarters or whatever. And I like to have my 2 fingers. So like this sandpaper, the size of the sandpaper is about the width of my 2 fingers. So I'm gonna take this sandpaper and use my 2 fingers and like fold them along the perimeter of the board and allow my fingers to be my sanding block now. And I'm going to do this. I mean, I would never do this standing up like this. I'm doing it to show you. I'm going to do it down. I'm going to do this until, again, I feel like I have a really nice, smooth finish. I've removed all of the grain that has popped with water use over time. If you're on a table, you can also move your entire like station at this point over to the corner of the table and work off the edge of the table so that your body is, if you're right-handed or left-handed, like either your body is like leaning off of the right side of the table and your board is on the left. That will just give you a better angle. So you're going to do that for all 4 sides, all your perimeter. I always like to do my 1 flat side first and all 4 perimeters, and then I will flip it over and sand everything on the front side. And front side always comes last. So we're skipping ahead. We have just finished our first grit. So we have just sanded our entire board or our entire utensil with our lowest, coarsest grit, so 80 or 120. And if you're doing a utensil or like a round object, this is the exact same process, but just you're probably not going to be using a sanding block. Instead, you'll be folding up sandpaper and doing everything by hand. So for this spatula, I would be doing the exact same thing. Oh, sandpaper is breaking. I'm going to be folding my sandpaper around the arm of my utensil and sanding it until it feels smooth.
Any tips for the inner bowl of a spoon?
Yeah, smaller sandpaper. That's it. So I have a little spoon here now. So honestly, I mean, I really do prefer the hook and loop sand. If you have a lot of spoons to do, I really prefer hook and loop sandpaper, aka Abranet, because it's more flexible. But if you're using like regular old sandpaper as well, so this is just like a piece of that sandpaper. I rip my sandpaper into like the tiniest little. So with spoons, with spoons, I usually do it in like a circular motion, and make sure, and the end grain in the spoon here is going to be like a little bit trickier, but so you'll go back over that at the end in like along with the grain, but for most of your sanding, in like a circular motion for the inside of a spoon bowl should be like perfect. Same for the outside of your spoon. Again, I think you always want to have your grain perpendicular to your body. We have 3 minutes left, my God. So
I think we can go over a little bit because I know you need to get to the oils. And then if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat box. So if you can't stick around to hear the answers, we can definitely email you after.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely email you. So yeah, same deal for the spoon. You're always sanding along with the grain. So I'm sanding up and down the handle because this is long grain. I'm cutting or I'm ripping my sandpaper into like baby sections. That is so that the sandpaper can conform to the shape of the spoon bowl and the head. So I have, and also one thing that I just did that's like terrible practice, and I did it because I was rushing. I always keep my sandpapers separate for different wood types. So this is a walnut spoon. This is a bamboo board. I should never use the same sandpaper that I just did for the walnut spoon as I did for the bamboo board, because I don't want the dust to be mixing. So I have just done my board. I've sanded it all in 150. I feel great about it. It feels like most of the knife marks are out of it. I have wiped it off with either, I use a brush to get all of my dust away. And then I can do the exact same thing with with 220 grit. Bottom first, all of your perimeter, and then flip it over and do the top. Same, nothing is different. When you're done, you're gonna brush it off and move on to 320. Do it all again. Same, bottom first, then your perimeter, and then flip it over and do your top. Then you're gonna brush it off. At that point, I would recommend using a rag to fully wipe down the surface of your board. So your rag and your surface of your board and your perimeter, and then take off the dust with your fingers, like flicking your rag. The goal with what I do in the studio is hose it off with an air compressor. The goal of that is to remove any dust particles that have caught themselves in the grain, so that when you go to apply your finish, your finish is able to like penetrate like way deeper into the grain, and not just sit on top of the board. So
how do you go up in grit? Do you have to go up 100 at a time, or can you skip levels of grit?
so the sandpapers that I gave you, 120, 320, 120, 220, 320, those are the grits that I use. You can do more grits than that, but like you don't have to. I yeah, some people use a lot more sandpaper than I do. I've chosen to stick it to those particular grits. I think 120 or 150 make it easy to like knock. I actually start with 80 for everything, so I add another layer in there. But and some people start with or sand up to 400 before they start applying finish. I stop at 320 because I also do wet sanding, and I find that that helps to that adds like that extra like buffing stage along with the sanding.
So I think we have some concern if we don't get to it. Is wet sanding with water or oil at this point? And are you okay with staying on for a few more minutes to just finish up the process?
I am absolutely okay with staying on, and I apologize that I have really run you all out of time. So yeah, I am like, Bila, we can switch if you have to leave. We can switch the
Oh
host.
no,
Okay.
I'm good. Keep
Cool.
going.
So yeah, I am like super happy to stay on with anybody as long as they, I mean, like not like literally as long as they want to, but like, you know,
Let's aim for the next 10 to 15 minutes, 10 minutes to wrap up and 5 minutes for questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Bila.
Cool.
So you're obviously not at this stage because also that would be, you like likely will be doing this sanding for like at least 30 to 40 minutes. I did not expect anybody to be like getting their project fully sanded and ready for oil in this time. So we're skipping ahead anyway, even if I wasn't rushing right now. So let us pretend that we have just gotten you up to 320. We have our beautiful board sanded all around. I have wiped off all of the dust. I have finished wiping off the dust from my workstation. That's important too, so you don't get extra dust everywhere. So now we have your board. I'm gonna turn it again so that, right, the grain is always perpendicular to my body. I'm gonna put my gloves on. I have a nice clean workstation, relatively clean. I have gloves that are clean. I also like to make sure that I'm not mixing my wax gloves and my oil gloves for the same reasons that you wanna keep your oil and wax separate. I'm gonna start with the oil that you have because that's the finish that I prefer. But you would do the exact same thing with wax or with the general finishes, salad bowl finish. So I'm giving this a good shake because actually I'm just gonna use this one so you can see it. So we're starting with this. I'm giving this like a really solid shake to mix up the propolis in there. The propolis separates from the mineral oil really quickly, which is one like thing that I don't love about this finish, but you know, such is life. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by rubbing this in. I never put finish directly on my piece. I mean, I never put, I would never pour oil directly onto this board. I like to have like a go-between, AKA the rag.
Which container that is in the material packet is the one that corresponds to this mix?
This one, the one with the pink tape around the bottom.
Thank you.
I'm rubbing this in little circular motions. And so even though I'm rubbing it in circular motions, like that is to like really push the oil deep into the grain. Then I'm gonna go back and in like along with the grain, finish wiping it off along with the grain. You'll notice that the finish already is starting to separate. So I'm gonna go ahead and shake it up again before I get more, and keep applying oil. You'll notice also that wood after this first oil that you'll do, because you're going to be applying like 3 coats of oil like by the end. This first coat of oil, like the wood is really thirsty, so you'll need like a lot more oil for this stage than you will for all of the stages after. So you'll be using like, hopefully not the majority of your oil, but like a lot more of it now than you will later. So like, don't be nervous about using a lot. That said, in terms of like applying oil, this is where daylight is helpful. I'm starting to like crouch down. I don't want it to be like super soaking. I want to see, I call them high spots or low spots. High spots are where it's like very shiny. I don't want anything to be like super shiny because that means that the oil is just like sitting on top of the surface. I want it to be like fully in there, so that's why I'm like doing these circular motions, and then I'm coming back and like rubbing it in, but also taking a little bit of finish off along with the grain. Yeah, so I'm almost done. By the end of your applying this first coat of finish, your board or your utensil should be like, how do we say, like a little bit, it should not be matte. I don't know if you can see this, but it's like a little shiny. It's not wet per se, but it's definitely not like, if I touch it, like oil will come off on my arm or on my hand, but it's definitely not wet. If it's wet, you have applied far too much oil and it's time to take some off. You can take some off with a clean rag. That's it, but like try not to apply that much oil in the first place that you need to be like taking off a ton, because that won't work. So at this stage, because it's like, it's wet, but it's not like super wet, we're going to go to our sandpaper, to our wet sandpaper rather. So that's the black sandpaper that you have. And you're gonna do this exact same thing with the 1000 grit sandpaper as you're doing with the 400 grit sandpaper. But again, we're starting with the 400 grit sandpaper because that's the lower grit than 1000. I'm putting my gloves back on because it's still wet. And I like pre-rip my little sheets of sandpaper. I rip them into like really tiny pieces because I, again, try to like use them as long as possible. And because it's expensive stuff. So I'm gonna even fold that little piece into a smaller piece, and I'm gonna use this to sand again in the direction of the grain as like my final buffing, but like also sanding after this first coat of oil. And once again, this is the 400 grit sandpaper. So I have my 3 fingers on top of this sandpaper, and I'm like holding it with my finger, with my like thumb, just like a little bit, so I keep a hold on it, because I'm not using the sanding block at this point.
In the last few minutes, what else do you need to know before your board is ready for use?
Yeah. So after this stage, so we have just sanded to 400. We are going to let this dry for 6 to 12 hours minimum. Luckily, I did that yesterday. So this is our board, same, after it's been dried for 6 to 12 hours or 24 hours at this point. I'm going to do the exact same thing. As we just did, I'm going to apply with my rag another full coat of oil all the way around, top and bottom, all the things. I'm going to let that dry for like, I don't know, a minute to 5 minutes or so, until it looks like not like super wet, not glistening. And I'm going to sand it again all the way around with my 1000 grit sandpaper. After that, you're gonna let it dry another 12 to 24 hours. And then guess what? You're gonna oil it again. And at that point, you'll be using like about a quarter of the oil that you used for this first round. So every round of oil, I would say like you're cutting the amount of oil that you're using in half for like every consecutive round. After that final like third coat of oil, and you can like keep doing this as long as you want, but like let's say after the final coat of oil, you're again like gonna let it dry, let it flash off overnight, like 24 hours or so. And then take your clean, either you can go like fancy and you use your Scotch-Brite and do your final buff with your Scotch-Brite pad, or you can just take like a new little rag after 24 hours and buff your oil in, or not your oil in, but you'll just like do your final like removing any excess oil with your clean rag and like buffing it into the wood in little circular motions, and then finishing it along the grain. Give that about 24 hours and you should be good to use it. Question.
So is the 24-hour drying period in between each oil sanding, wet sanding? Is that paramount? Like, is that important?
I mean, I say that you can do 12. Like I usually do 12. When I'm like feeling really pressed for time, I might do 6 hours of dry time in between stages. I'd caution against anything less than that, because you really want to give the chance, like the oil, a chance to penetrate into the fibers and let the oil flash off sort of naturally.
What's the difference between the 2 tincture bottles in the materials packet?
Mm-hmm. So the so again, this bottle is the mineral oil, propolis, and rosemary oil blend that I make and that I use on all of my utensils and boards. That's like a 100% natural finish. The other bottle is this salad bowl finish, which again I will look up the ingredients of in a minute. But this is the other finish that you have. So I would say use this on anything that you want to eat off of, really. But know that, and you'll apply it in exactly the same way, like with a little piece of brag, same exact sanding process. I would say probably you don't need to be doing the wet sanding quite as much. You can, but it might not work as well with this finish because it'll dry a lot faster. So that's this other little bottle. And then the container of wax, the little container of wax that you have, that is candelilla wax mixed with mineral oil and, again, like a little bit of rosemary extract. Any other?
When do we use the wax?
You can use the wax in exactly the same way that we just did for the oil. Yep, exactly the same.
In what instance would you use the wax over the oil, just to reiterate?
That is a personal choice. Like, if you don't want to be refinishing your stuff as frequently, I would say maybe use a more wax-based finish. If you want to use a wax finish for that thing going forward, use the wax finish. But if you're like, I'm not so sure, maybe, like, I don't mind refinishing it as often, and maybe, yeah, like, I'm just not so sure, like, maybe stick to the oil finish. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions in our last couple minutes? And please throw them in the chat. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just apologizing for going over.
We did have a couple people exit at time, but thank you all for sticking around. Were I to rinse the dust off rather than dust? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Mute yourself and ask the question. Were I to rinse the dust off rather than dust, how long to wait for drying out of the wood? A day. Yes. Were I to rinse the dust off? When you say rinse the dust off, so I said
rinsing versus dusting off with a brush, because it's going into the air.
So I personally prefer a vacuum. I generally don't like brush things off. I was doing that right now for sound. If you have a little vacuum, I highly recommend using that instead of getting dust everywhere, because, like, I resanded like half of a board yesterday and I have like dust everywhere right now. So, like, use a little vacuum. Oh, HEPA, yes, that's what I have too. I use the Festool. I should be a Festool commercial right now. I use Festool brand for like everything. They make the best vacuum cleaners and sanders that have like dust collection in them. I highly recommend using a vacuum cleaner. Like, just like hold your hand over the nozzle. What brand? Festool, Festool. And HEPA or HEPA, whatever. Yes, Miele, however you pronounce it, is like a great brand too. If you have just like a vacuum cleaner at home, Festool, that's it. If you have a vacuum cleaner at home with like a regular nozzle head, just like pretend this is the vacuum head, hold your hand over it as you like vacuum off your thing, off your board or whatever, so that like your hand is the bumper and like not scratching the surface of your piece. So yeah, vacuum cleaner all the way. Also, that's why I use rags to like collect the dust first off of everything. And working outside is like definitely helpful. Certainly near windows, make sure you have like good ventilation everywhere. And wear your dust mask, obviously, for sure. Nikki.
Connie says, want to see a before and after?
Yes.
I'm gonna spotlight your video.
Oh my God.
Oh, look at that.
Wow. Connie, did you just take that up all the way to 320 and like wet sand and everything? Wow. Oh, you're on mute.
I did it earlier. I sanded before the class.
Nice. Okay. Amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, you're like Vanna White right there.
Any other questions?
Also, guys, please feel free to like, you got that. Yeah, like you all have my email address because I've been emailing you. But please feel free to email me any questions. Always like DM me on Instagram is a way to get in touch with me for sure. But if you want like real answers, I'm available always via email, and I will send you a fucking lengthy response. I promise you that. Also, I'm super happy to just like get on Zoom or like to like put eyes on whatever you're working on. I will send you also an email of like all of the finishes. I spent way too long on that, and apologies in advance, or apologies for what I already did. I will send you though an email of all of the finishes that I talked about and a little blurb of like why you might want this, why you might not want this, and again like the ratios of finishes that you have that you're working with or that I've sent you already.
Well, thank you so much. You can unmute yourselves if you have any other questions, comments. Thank you. And thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really fun class.
So
thanks, Al.
This
was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bye. Thank you all for staying so late. This is how I roll, apparently.
All right, thank you. Have a great evening, guys. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Oh, are you still here?
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna end it now.
Okay.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, I'm home, my dad.
Okay, now I'm gonna end it.